Hello, everybody. This is Frank Iron Age News, Wednesday, August 19th, 3:30 p.m. in sunny Florida. It's 135 degrees outside. So we'll get this over with quickly. I had a little uh, negative commentary we had to deal with on one of our channels, but that's fine because nothing better than wild anti-Semitistic conspiracy theories spilling over into the comments section. And today we are going to defend the evil Drumfler yet again, but not really. We're going to be talking about things that have come up just in the last couple days dealing with Donald Trump and his Korean policy. Those of you who have seen the reports is that Donald Trump is bowing down to the North Koreans and he's not going to do certain things with the South Koreans. And then in the second hand, he says that he is going to not have military operations with the South Koreans because they won't pay for things, stuff like that. We sort of have the story around the world that nobody ever ends up paying for what they're supposed to pay for with us. And then when they get called on it, as you would have with some fourth tier friend who still owes you $20 from college, Henry Pope, you would say to yourself, and then they'll say, oh, blah, 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 you're being hard on it. But you're not really. So let's talk about what's occurring on the Korean Peninsula. And like I said, it's not being covered accurately. President Trump has ordered the United States to substantially reduce the current military exercises with South Korea. North Korea says it's not enough. South Korea was apparently caught off guard by all this because it's supposed to start either today or tomorrow. And critics say Trump is weakening an alliance and we're all going to be overrun by the Chinese, of course, right? But if you step back from the individual headlines, a different picture emerges, and it should, in your mind, make you wonder why people even say what they do, seeing what they see with the Iranians, or vice versa. Trump appears to be running several diplomatic tracks at the same time. He is maintaining a surprisingly favorable personal relationship with the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. And with military dictators, it's good to have a personal relationship. He's continuing America's military relationship with South Korea. He is pressing Seoul, which is the south of Korean capital, over what it contributes to its own defense and over its reluctance to support American objectives involving Iran. And exactly the same time, his administration is courting South Korean industrial giants because the United States desperately needs their shipbuilding expertise. And you think it's all blah, 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 and it's just, he's just flying by the seat of his pants. Absolutely not. Even though they sound contradictory, these aren't necessarily contradictory at all. They may instead tell you something about how Trump is working with his diplomacy in the Far East. He has different models of diplomacy that he uses around the world. So let's start with the North Korean side of this whole thing. North Korea's response to the reduced Ulchi Freedom Shield exercises was pretty revealing. Kim Yo-jong essentially said, different person, reducing the exercises doesn't change anything. By the way, Kim Yo-jong is the sister of the fearless leader of North Korea. Okay, so if you hear it's always Kim, it's the last name. All right. North Korea still considers the exercises to be provocative and threatening. Of course they do. They're designed to fight the North Koreans. And that's fair, right? It's essentially the position Pyongyang has taken for years, Pyongyang being the capital of North Korea. But then something unusual has occurred. North Korea did not use Trump's decision as an opportunity to humiliate Trump, saying he's afraid, this and that and the other thing. Instead, Kim Jong, preserved the distinction between American policy over a long period of time and the relationship between Trump and Kim Jong-un. She acknowledged that their personal relationship remains favorable, and you're going to see various quotes of that out there. And that is pretty significant because the whole I'm not happy with the military exercise, that is boilerplate North Korean communism. But then in the next breath to say, but we like President Trump, that shows you a little something different. It's not party politics all the time because Trump has given them a lot of things without giving them anything. And that's what makes it significant. He has managed to maintain a personal diplomatic channel with the leader of a nuclear armed adversary who is incredibly paranoid, bloodthirsty, etc., while simultaneously maintaining the military alliance designed to deter that adversary in South Korea. And Trump did not cancel the exercises. He reduced them in size, which is a very Asiatic thing. We don't cancel things, we just change them around a bit. And that's an important distinction. The United States and South Korea are still going to train together. American forces remain in South Korea. The alliance remains intact. The Pentagon says the modified exercises still accomplish essential training objectives, which honestly is crazy because the whole plan is to survive for 15 minutes before we hit them with a nuclear weapon. Basically, if you see where the border is and where the arrogant South Koreans have never moved their capital more than 15 minutes from the border, it makes it almost impossible to defend against a full-on assault from North Korea. That being said, it should also be considered by many, including myself and a number of other people, that the Kim family is much more excited about just beating their own people to death. Why not be the big fish in the little pond? And we are treating them like that, except that they have nuclear weapons, which they're going to continue to do because democracies can't just say, we're going to allow you to continue to victimize your people because we were too late to step in and stop you from making nuclear weapons, and now we're fucked, which is exactly what occurred and which the Trump administration is trying to get out of in Iran. Okay? So Trump therefore gave Kim something, without giving him everything by making the reduction. He reduced something North Korea considers provocative while preserving the overall military structure that deters North Korea. So that is what they would call leverage without rupture. But there is a much larger issue behind all that, of course, which is nuclear North Korea. Now, theoretical nuclear weapons is one thing, which is what you have to deal with the Iranians. They want to make them. They're on the way to making them. The nuclear program of North Korea is not theoretical at all. It exists, and it exists in depth. And to this day, it just confounds people that if they look around the country at the whatever you want to call it, medieval circumstances most people live in, that these jokers were able to put together not one weapon system, but a number of nuclear weapon systems. And I think even a submarine. I could be wrong. North Korea, we're going to do a spotlight on North Korea in another couple of weeks in Pacifica. So North Korea has spent decades developing their own nuclear program and increasingly sophisticated ballistic missiles to deliver them. And at some point, American policy has to distinguish between what we would like the world to look like and what the world actually looks like. And that's where you get whipped in the media and all that kind of stuff, because you can't wave your magic wand and get rid of all the problems on the planet. However, there are problems we can get rid of. And officially, the United States continues to support the complete denuclearization of North Korea. But practically, North Korea denuclearization increasingly looks like a foregone conclusion in the opposite direction. They aren't going to give those weapons up. Kim Jong-un has repeatedly said that North Korea will not surrender its nuclear arsenal. All right. The program has continued expanding despite sanctions, diplomatic isolation, and multiple rounds of negotiation. Very true. Trump may therefore be moving towards a different question instead of asking, how do we make, and this has been, there are guys that have been working on this. This is not like Trump sits in a room and takes opium and just says this shit. All right. How do we make North Korea stop being a nuclear power? The more practical question is, how do we keep a nuclear North Korea contained, deterred, and communicating? We want them to be serene. We do not want them paranoid. They are paranoid, but we don't need them being paranoid at that moment. And those are very different objectives than a non-nuclear North Korea. Accepting reality does not mean approving of it. That's the big issue. The United States never has to recognize North Korea's nuclear weapons as legitimate. It doesn't have to remove sanctions. It doesn't have to abandon South Korea or Vietnam, or Japan. But Washington can recognize that attempting to force Kim Jong-un to surrender the weapons he believes guarantee his regime survival, which they do, which they totally do from the attack from the outside, whereas his massive police force protects it from the inside. It may not be it may not be realistic that they're going to found some kind of diplomacy that's going to turn him into a democratic prospect. It's not going to happen. And once you accept that reality, the diplomatic possibilities are going to change. The objective becomes preventing nuclear use. They constantly, when they get upset, they test a bomb. They really should stop that. We understand that what they're doing, or they throw a missile out near Japan. Preventing proliferation, limiting additional weapons development where possible, maintaining deterrence, blah, blah, blah. These are all things that we can do, and that is the containment. And historically, containment is something the United States understands very well. And this is where Trump's personal diplomacy becomes more important than it sometimes appears. Trump doesn't have to like Kim Jong-un, all right? Kim doesn't have to like the United States. They simply have to believe that they can communicate with each other. During Trump's first presidency, the United States went from exchanging threats with North Korea to Trump and Kim meeting face to face 3 times. Those meetings didn't denuclearize North Korea. That needs to be acknowledged. We did not get the nuclear weapons away from him in Trump's first tour, nor will we get them away from him in this second. But neither did decades of sanctions, ignoring them, starving them, blah, 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 fed into the paranoia, which is what they used to feed into the people, which allowed them to harness the entire economic system of a little country into coming up with these nuclear weapons. Pretty fucking serious, if you look at it and how long it takes to do it. The other one was Pakistan, right? How the hell did that happen? Well, that was easier. They stole all their shit from the Europeans. But the fact of the matter is, if North Korea's arsenal cannot be realistically eliminated in the foreseeable future, then maintaining direct communications with the man who controls that arsenal has value of its own. That doesn't replace the deterrence, it complements deterrence. Meanwhile, and this is where Trump's diplomacy becomes particularly interesting if you're following along at home, the truth is that Trump, who speaks favorably about Kim Jong-un, is not necessarily the Trump that South Korea gets. Trump has repeatedly criticized Seoul, which is the South Koreans, over how much it contributes towards its defense. There is still an ongoing war. They've never signed a peace agreement between North and South Korea. Now, he has also expressed frustration that South Korea isn't doing enough to support American objectives, including Iran. If you saw him on the news the other day, he said, send us some ships, send us something over here so we can do this blockade. This was his pretext for everything that he is doing now. He went to every country that is an ally and asked them to contribute a ship, and nobody did it. So you know what everybody's going to get when this is over, right? The reduction in the military exercises, therefore, is 2 purposes. It's conciliatory to North Korea, and it's a slap in the face to the South Koreans saying, hey, security guarantees carry expectations. You have to do something for us. The United States is going to spend millions of dollars, or billions with a B, station tens of thousands of troops, and accept enormous military risk defending South Korea, because any land war there, as I said, go look up how long you'll survive. Then Washington expects South Korea to contribute when the United States needs assistance elsewhere. That is a very different conception of an alliance. And they're going to have to get their shit together too, because at some point they're going to have to coordinate between the Taiwanese, the Japanese themselves, Vietnam, everybody in that area. So it'd be best for them to get it together now and stop doing whatever it is that they're doing. And then the big question, as we all know, is the shipyards. So here's where the story is, I think, my favorite part of it. And people don't understand how they can do these things. I'm old Philadelphia Naval Shipyard, you know, was the greatest thing when I was young before War on Terror. You could go in there. My cousin worked there. My father worked there for a short time. You could get on all these ships. The battleship Iowa was there, New Jersey, Missouri. There, everybody was there. The Intrepid was there. Everything was in that place. That place was something to see. Even though it was getting decrepit at that point, it was something to see. So while Trump is criticizing South Korea over defense spending in Iran, his administration simultaneously getting South Korean shipbuilding industries in. I think they went to the Japanese first. There's some problem there with Japan, not so much of availability as South Korea had, because the South Koreans are shipbuilding machines, and America increasingly cannot build enough of them quickly enough. And we can blame who we want, and that's a show for another time. There should be a massive investigation through the various inspector general's offices. Some people should be taken out and shot in the back of the head. There's a lot of damage that's been done to the United States shipbuilding and to maritime acquisition by the military in and of itself, let alone what we were talking about with merchant marine shipping, which also has to be brought back at the same time. And there's a lot to do there. People that have been in this will say, I've been in this 40 years, we can't do it. You know what? It's because you're a fucking jerk off. Anything can be done if you throw enough money at it, but you have to throw the right money in the right place with the right manufacturers. And we're finally starting to get that with some of these new young crazy guys. I don't care for them, but you know what? They're breaking up the logjam of military procurement, and that's what we needed to have happen. But Washington doesn't simply want South Korea building American ships forever in Korean shipyards. The larger objective is increasingly to bring Korean capital, management techniques, and everything else to the United States, hence Hanwha's investment in the Philadelphia shipyard. All right. Not only have they replaced Kverner, which was a shit operation for many reasons, not always theirs, but shit operation. They went from just going to build a couple of ships to now getting part of submarine contracts, all when they haven't even built everything they need yet. All right. Hanwha's investment in Philadelphia shipyard is the most visible example of this. And Trump can criticize the South Korean government on Monday and welcome billions of dollars of South Korean industrial investment on Tuesday. And there's no contradiction because he sees that these are different transactions, and more people have to understand this is, everything's not linear. Everything is not, what would be the term for it? And everything is not as cut and dry as the media tells you things are. Far from it, or some of these other governmental people tell you things are. And don't go by just political party anymore. You have to either want to be in it to make America what it should be, or you're not in it, and you can do what you want to do. So, as I was saying, he doesn't see there's a contradiction between shutting down half of a military exercise, telling a dictator he's a great person, and then telling South Korea, I'm going to kick you out to the street. Oh, by the way, I want your shipbuilders to come to the United States and spend money. It's all there for him, and he sees that they are all different, tangential, not even tangential. These are all different issues. You cannot put them all in one ball, which people want to make things simple and elegant. It's not always that way. And as I said, North Korea is an adversary there, which is outside of that thing, whose nuclear arsenal, once again, has to be deterred. Deterred just means that they don't want to keep using it, or they want to keep making it bigger. They can stay with what they've got. They're fine. And that is part of the issue that we see with this overarching, and I'm falling apart on this, but the important piece of this shipbuilding strategy is America cannot rebuild its maritime industrial base overnight. I did an article called Moneyball, the Moneyball of Shipbuilding, which is what the president is trying to do. I'm pretty sure something similar, which is We can't, if you ever saw that movie, you understand what they were trying to do. We can't build this golden fleet, but we can rebuild it in an aggregate, which is what we're going to be doing. All the stuff he tells you about that new Trump cruiser or whatever, that's bullshit. That thing will never get built. It's a nightmare. It is just a waste of money. They did that to shut him up, but you know what? It's taking some haters and giving them something to do all day. It's hate on that and come up with reasons things can't be done. In the meantime, South Korea has already increased the capacity of a shipyard that before that could barely build barges, you know? And at a certain point, since it's going to be, they're not bringing all South Koreans over to work. More and more Americans will be employed. I forget what the high point was in the old days during the war, but it was tens of thousands of people. Shipbuilding is a big industry, plus the sailors, they have to be Americans. Once a ship is flagged under the United States, you have to have American sailors. And this is going to be something we're going to talk about later about the permanent tariffs that you're going to see and how it's going to be associated with this new modern American mercantile fleet. So, like I said, all these good things can come together in one common area, Korea, and not be conflicting. It sounds odd, but it's very true. And we would say this would be more, I guess, industrial diplomacy. We'll go with that. So if you put these pieces together and Trump's Korea policy begins to look less chaotic than individual headlines would suggest to you, which they do, with North Korea, he used personal diplomacy while maintaining military deterrence. With North Korea's nuclear arsenal, he continually says to them, hey, wouldn't you like to get rid of those nuclear weapons? They say no. He says, okay, we'll ask again in a couple of months. With South Korea, he maintains the alliance while demanding greater burden sharing. An extra $1 billion out of their pocket to protect their people versus us spending $1 billion. I consider that a win-win, don't you? And with the military exercises, he can reduce their scale as both a diplomatic signal to Pyongyang, which is the north, and a pressure mechanism against Seoul without eliminating them altogether. They are pretty much just an aggressive move. Once again, go out and look at what would happen if the North Koreans, because they will strike first. That's the rule. North Korea strikes first. How much time do you have to? This is not like when people tell you if China were to strike Taiwan, it would be over in 20 minutes. Absolutely. That's days. That is days, maybe weeks. North Korea comes into South Korea and there's no nukes involved. It's pretty quick. So that's why I said Trump's diplomacy is much more fluid in this area because it's an entirely different ballgame. He's one of the few presidents, say Nixon actually was good with this too, who understands different tactics, different areas, big toolbox, does what he has to do. If you notice, nowhere in here do we mess around with anybody's money, right? If North Korea was Iran, Scott Bessent would be shutting down all North Korea's money, right? He'd find a way to do it. But since North Korea is for real with what they're doing, which is just to keep their own country hostage and remain in charge of it, they don't have all the superfluous shit sitting around like the Iranians, who are just really basically a bunch of gangsters with a religious theme, you know? So the final point that we can make here is that for decades, Washington has spoken about North Korea as though eventually the right combination of kissing ass and sanctions and pressure was going to make them surrender. And maybe at one time that was possible, but those days are long gone. Let's not kid ourselves. North Korea has invested all of its national resources, all of its money into becoming a nuclear power. Kim Jong-un appears to regard those weapons as fundamental to his regime's survival, which it is. And if that's true, as far as he's concerned, continuing to build every diplomatic initiative around complete denuclearization may actually prevent progress on objectives that are achievable. Can we limit further expansion? Can we get a little bit more friendly? Can we develop some trade in there? Because everything they do is on the black market. Any dollar that we can take from the Koreans is one less dollar that they can give to the Chinese. And honestly, if you remember the great series on public television of Emperor Wang Gung, I think it was, you will know that at some point when Korea feels strong enough, it will eventually attack China because that's what it does. So that's why China has enjoyed having, the two Koreas just as much as we have. Because if Korea reunited, it would immediately attack China. That's just it is what it is. If you don't believe me, Emperor Wang Gung, watch the show. It's great. It's better than that other one that they did in Turkey with Suleiman the Great. That was a good one, but Wang Gung is better because we know so little about the Koreans and their history. I mean, as an average person, that it's just like, wow, most people in the United States, their whole Korean history is twice fried freaking chicken wings and then the show MASH, right? So that's what's going on with this. Look at it the way you should, which is as a seasoned diplomat instead of like a crying old lady, and you will see where this is going. But also, as you must know and realize, this is why we don't want Iran to have the bomb, because then you have Korea. And unfortunately, geographically and all this other stuff, Iran can do more damage to the world where it is than North Korea can do where it is. So that's all I have for you on this. Like, subscribe, do whatever you want to do. I don't really care at this point. Somebody else may. If you want to sign up for any of our newsletters that we have, because we're doing that more and more. That's State of the Strait and Pacifica. State of the Strait has to do with everything that's happening in the Hormuz right now. Pacifica is the Pacific Rim. These are more just security type or intelligence type documents. But if you're an investor or something like that, or if you like, or one of those people that likes to write your own things and riff off of other people's things, then go ahead. It's great. There's plenty of stories out there for you to talk about. We've been so slow because it's been so hard to get real news the last few weeks between these the primaries, everybody lying about everything else. You spend more time getting rid of false stories than you do about regular stories. We could be doing color commentary on a lost dog and probably get more going on than that. So that's it. Have a good day. Talk to you later on.